I've been a self-employed architect, as he was saying, since the 70s. And we have done mostly social housing. But since 95, social housing has diminished drastically. So I was very pleased. I guess I'm supposed to stand closer to this. Okay. So I was very pleased when in 2004, I was engaged by a group called the St. Clair West St. Clair West Affordable Housing Group. And St. Clair Avenue West, they felt there wasn't sufficient affordable housing in the neighborhood, and they wanted to do what they could to do it. And they proceeded to, so I was engaged then, and they, in November of 2005, they found this building, which was it was a St. Paul's Italian United Church on Ossington Avenue. And unfortunately, the Italians had gotten older and moved on to Woodbridge and so on and so forth, and the church was basically vacant. And so they decided they would take it over. However, it is a landmark on Ossington. It's like, you don't really notice it, but the people in the neighborhood are really fond of it, and so on. So my client was St. Clair West Affordable Housing Group. The development consultant was Ganesh, which is now St. Clair's Multi-Faith Housing. And I was the architect, the structural K.H. Davis, mechanical was Sustainable Edge, electrical Algal, landscape Scott Torrance, and interior design and color Sheila Fletcher, who did some very interesting things on it. Anyway, let's see if I can, okay, there we go. So the task was to convert this vacant United Church building into 20 affordable housing units. The reason it was 20 units was because the particular program that was funding this said 20 was the absolute minimum. So somehow or other we had to do it. The building was, of course, too small, so we had to take off the existing roof here and over the the sacristy and the chancel, and replaced it with 2 stories of wood frame construction. It also became accessible because we did an inclined walkway up from Ossington and installed a Lula lift in the building, which is low usage, Lula. Anyway, it means you don't. It isn't a high speed, high volume lift. In order to fit the 20 units onto the site and to fit within this set GFA, we did things like cantilevering the second floor out from the main wall of the building. And to stay within the GFA, the units that we did in the upper 2 floors are all 2-story units that have like a mezzanine within the 2-story apartment. So the site, let's just see here. So when we started, this entire area here, was an asphalt parking lot. And what we wanted to do was to provide a pleasant little garden for the residents here, which is this area here. We put bike sheds at the back of it to protect them from the view of the laneway and the adjacent industrial uses. We put in a garbage storage shed on the Ossington side of it to shield them from Ossington, and then in the courtyard are these raised 4-square gardens, which encourage people to do things like grow vegetables and independent growing and so on. So this was all part of this interesting thing of trying to involve the residents who would live there. There are a few other things like rain barrels all over the place. And you can see that the parking area back here is considerably smaller. There's a nice little brick garden shed where the compost bins were supposed to sit. I don't think they ever got there, but anyway, no doubt that's part of the continuing education of the residents. Okay, so we'll go on. So this is the ground floor of the building. So it was this interesting L-shaped building. This is the existing kitchen of the church, and you can see that there are quite high ceilings. The sills of the windows are very high. So we decided what we would do would be to basically raise the floor of the basement, and as a result, instead of a 6-foot sill on a window, we have like a 4-foot sill on the window. And that also enabled us to put the plumbing under the new slab, so above the existing slab, so we didn't have to rip out all of the existing slab in the building. That was good. Oh yes. And we discovered that the walls were actually leaking quite a bit, so we put Dimplex on the walls. And then for insulation, we set the steel studs slightly out from that so that the foamed insulation would go behind the studs and you'd get a good separation there. I'll just briefly go through the plan. So this is a common area with a kitchen so that they could have communal meals if they wanted to do communal kitchen stuff. This is a 2-bedroom accessible unit. Whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Here's the boiler room for the whole building, electrical room, common laundry, and this is the Lula elevator at the front entrance. So there's 4 bachelors. This one's accessible, and this is the 2-bedroom accessible there. On the second floor, the original building had this lovely glulam roof, which unfortunately can't fit between the glulams, so the whole thing had to go. We also took off all of the masonry above that level, so that the whole new structure started from the same point. Similar thing to the basement, we set the steel studs out from the wall and foamed the wall. On this level, there are, let's see, there are 2 1-bedrooms, and the rest of them are bachelors, but they're all one level. Again, this level can be accessed by the Lula lift. So there's a little bit of, okay. And it was fortunate, the corridor walls here became structural walls so that we could do simple wood frame construction in the upper levels. So we're not doing anything complicated. The existing ground floor is open web steel joist, so we're keeping that. And then we put in these walls so that we cut down the span of the upper levels. Some units are quite small. You have to admit that. But they are all independent. Okay. Okay, the second floor. So this is where all of these units are 2-story. So you can see where there's an X here. That means that that's the 2-story section of that unit. And it meant that, for example, here there's a 2-story, well, not quite 2-story, but a very tall window next to a wall. And as a result, the reflected light bounces light down into the apartment. So we're keeping the number of windows to a minimum, and we're trying to use the placement of the walls as effectively as we can. Okay, and then the insulation on this it's just Roxel on the inside, and then the exterior is an EIFS system, so that we could get up to a reasonable level of insulation. And I threw in this slide with the pipes, because each unit has supply and return from the central system, which was part of Mario's idea of not having these individual units within each suite, which not only take up a lot of room, but also can contribute to mold and so on. He has a very strong opinion about that type of unit. Anyway, made for some interesting bulkheads in the corridors. Okay. So here's the mezzanine level. And that's the mechanical room, which is accessed from this stair. All of these, the units, whoops, sorry, I'm getting away from the microphone again. So all of these units, most of them are just an open loft above the living space below. but some of them have actually enclosed bedrooms. This is a 2-bedroom unit. This is also a 2-bedroom unit. This unit has a balcony. Every unit in the entire building, of course, was different because we were trying to accommodate all these various things. And yes, sort of, it made it interesting, but it did extend it a lot. And okay, so here, this is the only slide I have of the radiant ceiling. So this is warm board. At the time, they only had their thicker panel, which we had to use for doing the radiant ceilings. So this is radiant cooling and heating on the ceilings of the ground floor, second floor, and mezzanines. And again, wood stud construction, simple roxel, and you can see the roxel there, and the eaves on the outside. This is the one unit that has the little balcony and the stair leading up to it. Sheila Fletcher, who is the interior designer, said, you know, in a situation like this, you really need to do something that provides a little bit of punch. And so she came up with this color scheme where we would color one wall in each unit a very brilliant color. So this one happened to be green. There was a red, there was a blue, there was, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And it really was a very interesting effect in the suites and made them special. The corridors also ended up with quite interesting color schemes. Okay, so this is interesting. So they actually started building the second floor. These are the cantilevers of the second floor before they took the roof off. They wanted to have the floor in place before they took the roof off. I don't know, this is just the way they did it. So that's the second floor being built. And here is the overhang, which we were able to foam the underside of it solid with urethane. Here you can see, this is how the basement floor was raised. This is the existing open web steel joists, and the rest of it is very simple wood frame construction, and all of the ceilings here, here are all the radiant heating and cooling. Okay. So you can see, relatively speaking, there isn't a lot of glazing on the exterior of the building. We used the existing openings. We did not introduce all that many more new openings, but by placing windows close to walls and doing things like that, or actually, as in that green unit, there's a window that provides light that comes down, reflects off another wall, lights downstairs. It's very, you know, trying to make do with the minimum. This is, after all, social housing, so we're trying to do things as cheaply as possible. When we were doing social housing in the 70s and 80s and the beginning of the 90s, you had to do things so that relatively low-skilled trades could go in and do the work, because you were going to be getting the cheapest contractors. It's always the bottom. You know, you're not going for the highest quality contractor. You're going for the person who can come in at the lowest price, or you simply your numbers won't work. Okay. So, for example, these were existing openings. These slits, they were in the chapel and so on. So we just kept them as they were. We didn't do any more renovation than we absolutely had to do. But the facade was kept. Okay. This is the lula, and it just barely fit under this humongous steel beam which was holding up the rest of the front facade, the pediment. Okay. That was the existing lobby. This is the lobby, this is the wall of the elevator, and this is the original glulam is still up there, and we insulated the top of that roof instead so that we could keep that one little bit of the existing building. And so that's the building as it is now. Seems to be working. The clients seem relatively pleased. And this is Mario's thing. So I'm just going to read what he had written. He said, the underlying design philosophy, I should point out, so this is the HRV, big HRV sitting up in the mechanical room. This is some of the radiant system. I have no idea. And this is, again, the warm board ceilings that were installed throughout. The little red things are, they found that the pipes tended to fall out of the slots. And so they had to take a little bit of the red tape and hold them in place until the drywall went up. However, but anyway. So the underlying design philosophy was to have no mechanical maintenance within the suites, including avoiding mold growth in air-based air conditioning units. Mechanical equipment was essentially restricted to the mechanical room. In summer, the ventilation air is dehumidified with cold water generated by the chiller, about 10 degrees Celsius, while the radiant ceiling is supplied with about 18 degrees Celsius water to ensure that no condensation takes place. Radiant cooling is a low-intensity system but has large surface area, but with a large surface area to meet cooling loads. Radiant cooling located on the ceiling is more effective than if it were a floor-based system. So that's from Mario, just like he was here. And then he has all of these various things about high-efficiency lighting and water-efficient plumbing, and I already mentioned the rainwater collection and so on, light roofs, etc. So I think that's probably it. Anyway, it was very interesting. The process, and there's a whole other show that would talk about convincing a client to use a system like this. And I don't know how many times I had somebody say to me something like, but heat rises. You can't put the heat in the ceiling. And you say, it's radiant. The sun radiates. It all works. But that whole process and getting the client on board, and then there's the whole thing of client education and resident education and so on and so forth. But that's something else. Okay. Thank you.